Born into a dynasty obsessed with power and bound by blood, Margaret of Austria was never meant for an ordinary life. Crowned Queen of both Spain and Portugal at just 14, she became a key political player in a crumbling empire, loved, feared, but ultimately doomed by the legacy she was born to uphold. This is her story. Margaret of Austria was born on Christmas Day 1584 in the city of Graz in the Duchy of Styria, in what is now southern Austria. Her father was Charles II, Archduke of Austria, and her mother was Maria Anna of Bavaria. Like many European royals, their bloodline was tangled with generations of cousin marriages, but this union went even further. They were uncle and niece. And yet, against the odds of such close consanguinity, 12 of their 15 children survived into adulthood. Margaret, the eighth child, was born into a crowded and ambitious household, surrounded by older siblings, already being groomed for greatness. As you may have guessed, both her parents came from the mighty Habsburg dynasty, the most powerful family in early modern Europe, whose ruthless obsession with preserving power led them to marry within their own bloodline again and again. They had emerged as a small noble family on the border between Austria and Switzerland centuries earlier, but by the 16th century they controlled all of modern-day Austria, Hungary, Bohemia and Croatia. There was also a powerful rival branch of the family that ruled over Spain and its vast colonial empire, born from a fateful split in the early 16th century when two brothers, Ferdinand and Charles, carved the vast Habsburg inheritance in two. Although Margaret hailed from the Austrian side, she belonged to the Styrian branch of the Habsburgs, which was not part of the senior line. A more powerful Habsburg line governed Austria as archdukes, ruling from their stronghold in Vienna. The head of this senior line at this time was Rudolf II, an eccentric and peculiar man, more interested in employing experimental artists and magicians at his court in Vienna than ruling the Habsburg dominions. Yet his family line was thinning, and Margaret's branch carried dangerous potential, so one day they might surpass their cousins and seize control in Vienna. That possibility made young Margaret, despite coming from a so-called junior line, a critical piece on the chessboard of Habsburg power politics, as we will see. Growing up at the junior Habsburg court in Graz, she learned to speak and read Latin, the language of scholarship and Catholic worship across early modern Europe. Young court women were expected to master manners, fashion, dance, and often music. Many, like Margaret, also wrote letters in Polish, German, Latin, Italian, or English, using ornate calligraphic script. This was how Margaret spent her youth. She was also conscious of the politics of her time. The Habsburgs presided over the Holy Roman Empire, a major agglomeration of hundreds of small principalities and free cities that were only loosely tied together by loyalty to a Holy Roman Emperor, usually the senior member of the Austrian Habsburgs. For centuries, the Holy Roman Empire clung to a delicate illusion of unity, but that illusion shattered in 1517 when the Protestant Reformation ignited a firestorm of religious revolt. As Lutheran and Calvinist states broke away, centuries of imperial order began to crumble. Margaret was born into the chaos, an age of rising tensions, deepening divisions, and a fractured empire on the brink. And soon, her own life would be drawn into the storm. When she was very young, thoughts turned to Margaret's potential marriage. No concept such as being a teenager existed in early modern Europe. You went from being a child to being an adult on the onset of puberty, typically around 13 or 14, which was widely seen as the dividing line between innocence and responsibility. Therefore, it was considered perfectly normal for a daughter of a royal line to be married off as a diplomatic chess piece when she reached this age. Of course, for royal women, marriage was rarely about love, and if you were a Habsburg, it was almost certainly to a relative. To them, inbreeding wasn't taboo, it was strategy. Uniting the Austrian and Spanish branches wasn't risky, it was righteous. Power, they believed, was safest when bound by one thing: their own blood. In Margaret's case, she might normally have been married to a more minor noble. However, her cousin Emperor Rudolf II had never married, despite a string of marriage negotiations over the years, and he would most likely be succeeded by his brother Matthias, who was also childless. Because of this, the reality was that the more junior Styrian branch of the House of Habsburg was likely to succeed to become the ruling branch in Vienna one day, with Margaret's brother Ferdinand potentially becoming the Holy Roman Emperor. For this reason, Margaret's hand in marriage became an important diplomatic tool in Europe's power politics. And so, in the early months of 1599, Margaret arrived to Spain in a blaze of ceremony and expectation, destined to marry her cousin from the Spanish branch of the dynasty. This match was no scandal by the standards of the day, but still striking. Philip III, newly in his 20s, and already burdened with the weight of kingship, was wed to a girl of just 14. With this union, Margaret didn't just become Queen of Spain, she became the ceremonial empress of a global empire. By 1599, the Spanish crown had absorbed Portugal and its overseas riches, ruling vast stretches of the Americas, the Caribbean, Africa, Asia, and the Pacific. So, when the 14-year-old Margaret wed Philip III in April 1599, she had, with one ceremony, become arguably the most powerful woman on earth. But behind the glittering facade of palaces and ceremony, what awaited her? A life of influence, or one of isolation and duty? Philip III was on paper one of the most powerful men in the world. He had just inherited the Spanish and Portuguese crowns from his formidable father, Philip II, a stern and relentless ruler who had spent decades waging wars across Europe to crush Protestantism and restore Catholic dominance. Yet in doing so, he left behind a fractured, bankrupt kingdom. It was into this uneasy inheritance that the 14-year-old Margaret arrived, but at the same time, there is no doubt that she had influence. Her husband, unlike his father, was indecisive and easily swayed, and she quickly began to exert quiet but growing influence. Her mission was clear: to bend Spanish foreign policy toward the interest of her Austrian kin. Luckily for Margaret, her marriage to Philip was close and affectionate, and it soon resulted in children. In fact, there was rarely a time when she was not pregnant for the remainder of her life. But this was no ordinary royal lineage. Both Margaret and her husband Philip III were born of uncle-niece unions, making them some of the most inbred individuals in European royal history. Their genes were tightly wound, the family tree more like a circle than a branch. Every child born to them was the result of centuries of close bloodlines, and each pregnancy carried not just hope for the dynasty, but a risk of genetic collapse. Despite these odds, Margaret gave birth at least 8 times, and remarkably, 5 of her children lived into adulthood. For a couple with such dangerously entangled DNA, the outcome was nothing short of a miracle. Yet, even these surviving children carried the burden of their bloodline, and the genetic consequences became clearer in the next generation. On the 22nd of September 1601, Margaret gave birth to her and Philip's first child, a daughter named Anna Maria Mauricia. Like her mother before her, Anna Maria was married off young, betrothed to King Louis XIII of France at just 10 years old, and wed in 1615 at 14 years old. Anna Maria had a stillbirth, and then 4 miscarriages, before giving birth to 2 healthy boys, including Louis XIV of France, Europe's most powerful absolutist king. More children followed from Margaret and Philip's marriage. A girl, Maria, sadly died just a month after she was born in the spring of 1603. Their two younger children, Margaret and Alphonse Maurice, also died in either infancy or childhood, but the middle children survived. The eldest boy was named Philip after his father, and after his birth the king showered Margaret with love and attention. Born in April 1605, he would become King Philip IV of Spain one day, and would rule Spain and its empire for 44 years, becoming known as Rey Planeta, the Planet King. Such was the extent of Spain's world-spanning empire by that time. Another daughter, Maria Anna, born in 1606, married Ferdinand III of the Austrian Habsburgs. This was her first cousin, he being the son of Ferdinand II, Margaret's older brother. Maria Anna gave birth to 6 children, but only 3 survived into adulthood. Finally, in 1607 Margaret gave birth to a boy named Charles and another son named Ferdinand in 1609. Charles only lived to his mid-20s, but was a respected figure at the court, who was briefly considered as a potential future king when his older brother King Philip IV became severely ill at one time in the 1620s. Ferdinand, as the youngest of the surviving sons, entered the church and became a cardinal, encouraged by his mother in his religion during his earliest years, whose Roman Catholic piety was well known. He also had a political career by serving as governor of the Spanish Netherlands in what is now Belgium for a time. Philip III was far from the most decisive of monarchs. He was notoriously impressionable, easily swayed by courtiers and even his strong-willed wife. This was significant. Spain still sat atop a vast, wealthy empire, yet decades of disastrous wars against the French, Dutch, English and Turks had drained its coffers dry. In Madrid, a desperate circle of reformers now rose, demanding bold action to save what remained of Spain's fading glory. Margaret was not a good influence in this regard. Deeply conservative, she fiercely opposed any proposals to cut spending on the church and royal ceremony. The result was catastrophic. Spain's economic situation continued to decline, with the government going bankrupt multiple times over in the course of Philip III's reign, just as it had under his father. At the heart of the Spanish court, a fierce power struggle erupted. A faction of courtiers rose in open opposition to Margaret, accusing her fanatical Catholic zeal of warping the king's judgment and dragging the empire into chaos. She clashed repeatedly with the Duke of Lerma, Spain's most powerful noble, and the true ruler behind Philip III's feeble throne. He begrudgingly respected her cunning and sharp political instincts, but there is also no doubt that he also deemed her to be a serious problem and tried to shut her out of power. For her part, Margaret formed an alliance with several other female members of the court. Though barred from official roles, they subtly shaped politics through personal connections, strategic counsel, and quiet persuasion, exercising real power from the shadows of the royal household. Margaret's allies included Dowager Empress Maria, widow of Emperor Maximilian II, who wielded influence at the Spanish court until her death in 1603. More enduring, however, was Margaret's alliance with Maria's daughter, Margaret of the Cross, a royal nun known for her piety and courtly connections. Together, the 3 Austrian Habsburg women steered Philip III toward a fiercely pro-Austrian, pro-Catholic policy. So, when Margaret's brother Ferdinand II faced a Protestant revolt in Bohemia in 1618, sparking the 30 Years' War, Spain swiftly backed Austria. Their shared goal was simple: to restore Catholic rule and Habsburg supremacy across the fractured Holy Roman Empire. It was a fateful decision that would bleed Spain dry. The war dragged on for decades, and by the time Margaret's son King Philip IV died in 1665, Spain was a ghost of its former glory, completely overshadowed by England, France and others. and the tragic cost of that downfall would be borne by the next Habsburg king. Ultimately, while Margaret succeeded in imposing a pro-Austrian policy on her weak-willed husband and outflanked the Duke of Lerma in this regard, she would never live to see the fruits of that same policy realised. She died on the 3rd of October 1611 from complications brought about by childbirth after giving birth to her son, Alphonse Maurice, who himself would die before his first birthday. She was just 26 years of age at the time. King Philip was devastated by her death and never remarried, despite being only 33. He died 10 years later. Despite her short life, Margaret succeeded in shaping court politics and for now had secured the dynasty's succession. Nevertheless, as the 17th century wore on, the Habsburgs doubled down on their deadly incestuous tradition, with uncle marrying niece generation after generation in a desperate bid to keep power pure. But the cost was catastrophic. Their bloodline twisted in on itself, leading to severe health issues, and from this genetic trap came Charles II, born to King Philip IV and his own niece. Feeble, infertile, and plagued by deformities, Charles became the living symbol of a dynasty on the brink. His broken body would not just mark the end of a king, but the extinction of the Spanish Habsburgs. Thank you so much everyone for watching this video on Margaret of Austria, Queen of Spain. If you want more videos on the Habsburgs, also let me know in the comments, and if you have any other suggestions, also comment them down below. Anyway, I hope you guys are subscribed and have notifications turned on to get all my videos as soon as I upload them. Anyway, that's all from me, so I'll see all of you in the next Forgotten Life. Thanks.